Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Travel Talk Show. I am just going to give everybody a few minutes to get in. It looks like people are just joining us now. So we're just going to give everybody just a couple minutes to get organized and to get in. Then we will start into our show about South Africa. Everybody knows, or well, you might not if you don't really know me, but if you do know me, you know I love Africa. So I'm kind of excited for this. South Africa is just such an amazing destination for so many reasons. And I can't wait to show it to you and to explore South Africa with you a little bit this afternoon. Also, happy St. Patrick's Day. I wore my green shirt for St. Patrick's Day, and then I got a green background for St. Patrick's Day, so I'm kind of clashing very green for St. Patrick's Day.
Are they supposed to be clovers in the back?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
I'm not sure how they show up, but that's what they're supposed to be. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't joined us before, we have the chat is one option if you want to just chat and say hi to everybody. So that is on your screen, either at the bottom in the toolbar or along the side. You should have a button that says chat. If you go in there, you can say hi, you can chat with everybody. You can set your, I think it defaults to just to the presenters, but if you want to say hello to everybody that is kind of on the forum and in the chat, you can then just switch that to say presenters and attendees, and that'll say, and then you can say hi to everybody. If you have a question specific to the presentation or the tour or something about the Women's Travel Club or anything like that, you can ask that in the question and answer spot, and that's a little different. It says Q&A on it, and you click on that and you can type your question in. We're going to keep those questions to the end, and we will then read them out at the end and answer them the best that we can. If we can't, we will find you the answer, but we'll answer what we can live. The other option at the end is if you want to actually come on and chat and speak, you can raise your hand. There's a button to raise your hand. When you raise your hand, I see that and I can open up your microphone, and that way you can come on live and ask any questions that you might have. So that is
lots of greetings, Marianne. By the way, somebody's a fellow Afrophile.
Oh, yay. Excellent. So we'll get started. We'll head to South Africa and we'll chat a little bit more at the end. So who we are, if you're new to our travel talks, or if not, we are the Women's Travel Club. We do small group tours for women worldwide. Most women come to us as solo travelers, but then quickly forge great friendships, and you're going to have friends then to travel with forever. So if you're coming as a solo traveler and you want to take advantage of a double occupancy rate, we will match you with a roommate, or of course you can pay that little bit extra and have your own room for the trip. I am Marianne Southall. I am the marketing director, so you get to hear me sometimes better than others for the travel talks every week, but we do try. And I have with me Irene Murray, and she is everyone. Head of operations. Hi, Irene.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to be here.
She is who generally mans the phones and the chat, so she's kind of our first line when you come to talk to us. She's who you will talk to. So there. Us.
Yeah, and I've spoken to many of the women who've already gone on chat. So nice to see you, everyone.
Excellent. Okay, so let's head down to the southern tip of Africa and explore this amazing destination. There's absolutely no doubt South Africa is blessed with spectacular natural scenery, a fantastic climate, and diversely interesting regions with diverse cultures. To say that South Africa is a virtual paradise is to say that South Africa is a virtual paradise is a true statement. The country geographically consists of an unspoiled coastline stretching for 1,740 miles. Dramatic mountains and escarpments, extensive bushveld, subtropical forest, and outstanding wetlands. Although a comparatively large country, it is easy to get around and on a South Africa vacation due to its excellent air and rail services. So you can see South Africa, this is our map of Africa, and right down at the southernmost tip is South Africa. South Africa is 5 times the size of the UK, and it borders on Namibia here up on the coast, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. And Zimbabwe, so right here in this little corner is also where Victoria Falls is. Oh, actually, I lied. It's up in this corner. There we go. So let's have a closer look at some of the major towns and areas. There are 3 international airports that will get you into South Africa if you're coming from an international destination to get there. So Cape Town, of course, then Johannesburg, which is probably the largest airport that they have. And it's a beautiful airport. It's one of my favorite airports in the world. It's just got great shopping and it's just a beautiful airport. And Durban down here. Then they have a selection of smaller airports for domestic flights, and that would include charters that support the lodges. So these are the smaller airports that you can use to just get around within South Africa, or some of them are going to be good airports if you're trying to get to one of the neighboring countries like Namibia and Botswana or Zimbabwe, and also into the little airstrips that support some of the lodges. South Africa is the perfect first trip to Africa destination. It is the one country that will give you a little bit of everything. It has a complicated and important history, which leads to a very distinct culture. Leading chefs, great restaurants, and a wine region to stand up against the top wine areas of the world. Natural scenery that must be seen to be appreciated. Safari options almost as good as Tanzania, Kenya, and Botswana, and certainly some of the most beautiful lodges. I like to call it Africa Light because it is a great first time trip. It's got great infrastructure, and if you're not quite ready to get too far out into the bush, it's just a really good option to get you into Africa, but still have a lot of the conveniences you're used to from home. Okay, so the weather in South Africa is great year-round. It's a good destination any time of year. Keep in mind that their seasons are opposite to our seasons. So summer, which is going to be November to March, which was our winter, so again, opposite, it can be quite hot during their summer. Autumn, lovely, it's mild, kind of settled, beautiful weather. Winter is our summer, so their winter is, you're gonna have colder mornings and colder evenings, and some areas might get a little bit more rainfall. Spring, again, mild and pleasant. So like a lot of destinations, those shoulder seasons, which are our spring and our autumn, are a great time to travel and visit South Africa. So let's start in Cape Town. It is ranked one of the world's most beautiful cities, and it's a real must-have on any South African itinerary. Cape Town is a port city on South Africa's southwest coast, and it's the legislative capital of South Africa. It was the site of the first European settlement in South Africa. The city of Cape Town had its origin in 1652 when the Dutch East India Company established a refreshment station for its ships on the shores of Table Bay. The location was magnificent, on well-watered fertile soil beneath the precipitous walls of Table Mountain. The indigenous inhabitants provided cattle but not labor, and the company imported slaves mainly from East Africa, Madagascar, and the Bay of Bengal area. The slaves brought with them something of their culture, and, especially in the case of the Muslims from the East Indies, their religion. Mixed race unions took place, but strong racial and ethnic characteristics remained. In 1781, the French established a garrison to help the Dutch defend the city against British attack, and the French presence influenced local architecture and culture. British occupation in the 19th century brought new parliamentary and judicial concepts and freedom for the slaves. Cape Town was the gateway. Let me get that to close. Okay, so I have a little bar up across my words, sorry. Cape Town was the gateway to Europe's penetration of the South African interior, and its close ties with continental Europe maintained. Today, Cape Town is a modern city with high-rise office buildings and pedestrian malls. Although it is a major political and economic center, its reputation still rests on its beautiful situation between mountain and sea, its cosmopolitan population, and the liberal outlook of many of its citizens. Let's have a look at some of the sites and attractions around Cape Town. Let's start with the obvious one, the beautiful backdrop to the city, Table Mountain. You can hike up Table Mountain or drive partway up, but we think the best way to really experience it is on the cableway. The ride is a gentle one, the rotating state-of-the-art cable car taking visitors from the lower station to the top in around 5 minutes. It operates 7 days a week, and trips occur within 10 to 15 minutes of each other. Atop the mountain is a self-service buffet cafe. While you can always pack a picnic and enjoy what is still part of a national park. You will be 3,500 feet above the city, and here in this unique location, you can find rock hyrax, lizards, butterflies, and the odd porcupine. There is also a wide array of bird life, from eagles to sunbirds flying above great patches of finbows and the Cape's indigenous flora. And speaking of which, welcome to Kirstenbosch Gardens. Stroll down the meandering paths and explore the meticulously crafted and maintained flora. Here you will find examples of finbows, and these both I think are examples of finbows, which are plants that are very distinctive to South Africa and to this area. This plant exists as a huge part of the Cape Floral Kingdom and is unique to this part of the world. If you tire of walking beneath the boughs and leaves, you can always relax on the lawns and indulge in a picnic of wine and cheese. There are also 2 restaurants and a shop with an indigenous nursery and a sculpture garden. Finally, the Boomslang is an amazing canopy walkway which provides visitors with a brilliant vistas of the surrounding nature. Visiting the quirky penguins at Boulders Beach between Simonstown and Cape Point is a unique experience. The colony, which lives in the middle of a residential area and is one of the few sites where African penguins, previously called jackass penguins because of their braying call, can be observed at close range as they wander freely in a protected natural environment. Now for a look at some of the history that is so important to Cape Town. Robben Island is a World Heritage Site and a museum offering daily tours. The tour begins at the Nelson Mandela Gateway at the V&A waterfront with a multimedia exhibition, museum shop, and restaurant, after which guests hop onto the ferry for a scenic trip to the island. Once on Robben Island itself, the tour is guided by a former political prisoner of the island for unique and incomparable sights and to the island's history. This is a good way to learn more about South Africa's political history and gain insight into the struggles and triumphs of the past. Also very important to the history of South Africa and an attraction we especially love is the Cape Town Diamond Experience. The museum pays tribute to the world's most precious gem, the diamond. South Africa's contribution to that history changed the world diamond industry forever. Witness a 3 billion-year-old story unfold from a diamond's formation to the final polished stone. The interactive museum is a must-see. After you learn about the history of the diamond trade, try on the miner's uniform for a great photo op, see replicas of some of the most famous diamonds in the world, and you can even try your hand at polishing a diamond. The Bocat may be one of the most photographed areas of Cape Town, but brightly painted houses and quaint cobbled streets aren't the only reason to visit. This part of Cape Town is packed full of history and culture. Part of the Bocat's charm is the mix of Cape Dutch and Cape Georgian architectural styles. You can actually visit one of the oldest buildings in the Bocat because it has been turned into a museum. The Bocat Museum, which showcases local Islamic culture and heritage, was built by Jan de Waal in 1768 and is the oldest house in the area that's still in its original form. In the 1700s, political exiles, slaves, and convicts were sent to the Cape by the Dutch from India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and the Indonesian archipelago. Although not technically correct, these individuals and their descendants became known as Cape Malays. Many of them eventually settled in the Bocat. In the mid-20th century, the apartheid government under the Group Areas Act of 1950 declared the Bocat a Muslim-only area and forced people of other religions and ethnicity to leave the area. This case was unique because during this time, most working class and non-whites people in South Africa were being moved away from the cities. To this day, the houses are a mix of Cape Dutch and Georgian architecture in distinctive multicolored rows on steeply cobbled roads. The choice of color is said to be attributed to the fact that while unleased, the houses were all had to be white. When this rule was eventually lifted and the slaves were allowed to buy the properties, all the houses were painted bright colors by the owners as expression of their, I wish I could get this, independence. Sorry. Okay. Thanks to its dry mountainous climate, the area just a glance north of Cape Town is home to more than 300 vineyards and is one of the world's largest wine producers. South African winelands travel attracts wine lovers with vintages that range from Sauvignon Blanc to its famed red Pinotage. Venturing inland and upwards from the Cape, you'll find the Bowland, meaning upland. It's a superb wine-producing area and indeed the best known in South Africa. The magnificent mountain ranges from Stellenbosch and Franschhoek provide ideal microclimates for the vines. There's been colonial settlement here since the latter half of the 17th century, while the Dutch first founded Stellenbosch and the French settled Franschhoek. Both towns pride themselves on their innovative young chefs, many based at wine estates, and the region has become the mainspring of South African cuisine. The winelands are a wonderful place to spend the day or a few nights. Of course, wine tasting is the activity of choice, and of course, pair your wine with some of the best cuisine available. Both Franschhoek and Stellenbosch are scenic and historic towns with lots of shopping opportunities. So many options for wine touring: full day tours, half day tours, foodie walking tours, bike and e-bike tours, the Franschhoek wine tram, hot air balloon rides, horseback and ATV tours. Wonderful accommodations throughout the winelands, including winery estates, hotels, and quaint guest houses. Now, to continue our journey onto the garden route, we'll go through Hermanus and Overberg, an incredible coastline renowned for its whale watching and full of quirky and quaint towns. This is where you'll find Shark Alley, famed for great white shark cage diving, and the De Hoop Nature Reserve, an unspoiled and protected nature reserve. Stretched along a narrow ribbon of land between towering mountains and a spectacular shoreline, Hermanus is surrounded by nature in her grandest style. Sitting on the edge of Walker Bay, this small coastal town offers a bewitching array of experiences. whales, and great white sharks, the most diverse floral kingdom in the world, mountain walks and pristine beaches, secluded forest, crashing surf, lagoons, and a hidden valley so beautiful it's named heaven and earth. High on the must-see of most visitors to South Africa is the garden route, and with good reason. You can't help but be seduced by the glorious natural beauty. The distance from Mosel Bay in the west to Storms River in the east is just over 200 kilometers, yet the range of topography, vegetation, wildlife, and outdoor activities is remarkable. The coast is dotted with excellent beaches, while inland you'll find picturesque lagoons and lakes and beautiful rolling hills. The lagoon protected from the sea by the monolithic sandstone heads, which makes quite a view for heading out to sea. Embracing an exquisitely beautiful lagoon and surrounded by ancient forests, Knysna is probably the most famous town on the garden route. Formerly the center of timber industry supplying yellowwood and stinkwood for railway lines, shipping, and house building, it still has several shops specializing in woodwork and traditional furniture. It has some beautiful beaches to explore or relax, or maybe mountain biking or hiking in the magnificent Knysna Forest. If you really are a beach lover, then maybe you need to check out Plettenberg Bay and its miles of sweeping golden beaches. The Plet, as it's popularly known, is a home to the iconic Rugburg Peninsula, intriguing lagoons and estuaries, towering indigenous forests, and unpolluted rivers, vinelands, and wine estates. There are so many activities to keep us busy, ranging from adrenaline to leisure, including hiking, mountain biking, abseiling, bungee jumping, skydiving, marine safaris, boutique shopping, and of course, more wine tasting. Our last stop along the garden route is Port Elizabeth. Port Elizabeth, or just PE if you want to sound South African, is South Africa's 5th largest city. A popular and significant destination for water sports, Port Elizabeth also offers many historic attractions, such as the historic Donkin Heritage Trail, taking visitors along the footsteps of the early 1820 settlers. British heritage is reflected in the Port Elizabeth Cricket Club and the oldest bowling green in South Africa. Port Elizabeth's greatest treasure, however, are malaria-free wildlife areas in its vicinity and clean beaches washed by warm water. The Great Karoo, which is just fun to say, is a vast semi-desert region of more than 400,000 square kilometers stretching over the provinces of the Eastern, Northern, and Western Cape. The Karoo offers the visitors vast plains, majestic mountains, champagne air, and picturesque Karoo towns steeped in history and intrigue. Here you can explore off the beaten track on foot, horseback, mountain bike, 4x4, or canoe, and enjoy spectacular game viewing and bird watching. Visit game and nature reserves, farms, and fascinating museums, Bushman engravings, and fossil collections. The Valley of Desolation is a unique Karoo landscape and ecosystem that surrounds the town of Graf Reinet, creating a type of oasis in the midst of the aridness of the Karoo. The vertical cliffs and columns of dolerite that teeter precariously 120 meters above the valley floor are breathtaking. This unusual feature is the product of volcanic and erosive forces that have taken 100 million years to form. They stand sentry over a valley, huge isolated hobgoblins of nature, forcing those who view them to suspend time, if only for a moment, to contemplate the force and beauty of nature. Now let's talk about one of the first things you think about when it comes to an Africa trip, safari. South Africa has lots of options when it comes to safari, from famous Kruger National Park to smaller private game reserves. So on this map, a lot of the national parks are the darker blue, and then there's like scattering of bigger private reserves, and then there's some smaller private reserves. So this is Kruger up here along the eastern side, and the kind of light blue there, that's Sabi Sands. You've probably heard of Sabi Sands, which is a kind of private reserve owned by a few different lodges and companies, but it is a private reserve, and so they butt up against each other, and there's no fencing, so the animals can go from one to the other, but one is a public national reserve and the other is the private kind of reserve right there. Kruger National Park in northeastern South Africa is one of Africa's largest game reserves, covering an area of over 7,500 square miles. All the big 5 game animals are found at Kruger National Park, which has more species of large mammals than any other African game reserve at 147. I can tell you firsthand that every time I've been to Kruger, I've had amazing animal sightings. I've seen the big 5 all before noon at Kruger. So it's a huge park, but it's definitely an excellent park for game viewing. One of the things to keep in mind is that Kruger is a national park. This means that you're going to be sharing all these amazing animal sightings with a lot of other people. Not only the safari vehicles, but anyone can bring their own vehicles into the park as well. So also in national parks, the vehicles must stay on the roads and you cannot get out of the vehicles. And you can see in this picture that there's a bunch of vehicles here behind these lions that are just people coming into the park for a day or visiting or camping, and they're their own vehicles, and behind that there's a couple of the actual safari vehicles with people in them. So you are sharing, and you could be in a big crowd of cars around an animal sighting. But the other option is private game reserves, and these are privately owned game areas, and typically only guests staying at the lodges can be on the property. However, some like Sabi Sands, and we showed you, run right along Kruger, and the animals can travel freely from one area to the other. So you're not really reducing the animals, although in some cases, depending on the reserve, because it's basically a huge area that lodges, companies, sometimes it's groups of lodges own this big huge area, and they have animals in it, but they could have, they know exactly what they've got in there. So whereas somewhere like Kruger, it's just so big and there's so many animals, and they have ideas, they do game counts and they have ideas. Usually when you go to a private lodge, they'll be like, yeah, we have this lion, and they might even have named that lion, and we have this and that, and they'll know exactly what they've kind of got in the park. Whereas a place that's so big like Kruger, you never know what you're going to come across. You don't really know at a private game reserve too. You're still driving around, and you might see or you might not see. Nothing's guaranteed, but they kind of know what they've got at the private game reserves. The lodges at the private game reserves are typically high-end, and you pay a premium to stay at them. So it's, you're paying a little bit extra to stay at the private game reserves because they're a little bit more, a little bit special. You're getting a little bit better kind of experience being at them, but in a lot of the times their lodges are beautiful and fairly high-end. These are actual pictures from a lodge that we stayed at on our last South Africa tour. But you can also expect very spectacular up-close animal viewing with much less traffic. And they're going to have rules at the private game reserve, so a lot of them will be, depending on how exclusive they are, but they might say there's only 2 vehicles allowed at a game viewing. So if they see something, say this lion, 2 vehicles can actually be there to see the lion, and then once everybody's taken their pictures and had the viewing and spent some time seeing the lion, they move on, and then they call on a radio, and a vehicle waiting, knowing that the lion's there, then comes in and gets to see the lion. So you're going to see the animals, and you're going to have good time to spend and get your pictures and spend time close to them, but you're also not fighting and jockeying for position with a bunch of other vehicles. It's just kind of a couple vehicles and you move on. Another benefit of the private game reserves is they can go off-road to get you closer to an animal. So if they know that, there's lions just kind of over behind this bush, they can drive off-road and get closer to it. Then they also, if it's safe to do so, will let you actually get out of the vehicle. So you can see this picture up here on the left is these are cheetahs, which cheetahs are very non-aggressive. So they are okay to kind of be close to on the ground. You wouldn't do that with a lion, and certainly not with a leopard, but and cheetahs are fine. So they let us out of the vehicle and let us kind of walk in a little bit closer to the cheetahs, and we got to take pictures, and the cheetahs just laid there and ignored us. The other thing is sundowners. So if you've ever been to Africa, you're probably very familiar with the sundowner concept. So when you do go out on game drives either generally happen first thing in the morning, so like getting up before it's light out, so 5 o'clock in the morning, or in the evening. So you're there for kind of sunrise, when you're going to have really good animal sightings at that first time of day, or sunset, and just coming up to dusk and sunset. And again, a great time for animal viewings. So in the evening, you typically would go around and do your animal viewings until it's starting to get close to sunset. And then they find a beautiful spot to bring you to. And they've set up some refreshments and drinks and snacks and such. And you get to get out of the vehicles and have your drinks and mill around and talk about what you've seen and watch the sunset. And it's just a wonderful, beautiful way to end a day. And then usually go back to the lodge and have dinner. So we've touched a bit about accommodations, but let's have a closer look at what you could expect during a safari. And I can tell you, you're never going to think about a tent in the same way. Africa can do accommodations like nowhere else in the world. Some of the most beautiful places can be out in the middle of nowhere. So this is a typical kind of mid-range safari tent. So when you hear of a tented camp, this is what you might expect in a mid-range kind of point. These tented camps, some are very permanent, some are semi-permanent in that they, at the end of the season, can take everything away and it's like they were never there. And then they can move the camp a little bit if they need to. So they'll be very well appointed, and you can't really see in this picture, but at the back of this tent, behind where this bed is, would be the full ensuite washroom. So it's quite comfortable. You'll be very comfortable in it. At night, it does cool down. Typically a tent like this is not air conditioned, but at night you've got the windows open. They're screened, but it's open and a breeze can come in. There's a fan in here, probably more for during the day than at night, because it does cool down enough at night that it's quite comfortable to sleep in. Now this would be your high-end luxury tent. So this would also be a tent, but typically not a tent that any of us have probably ever seen, but this is also a tented camp. And it's quite common for the higher end accommodations to have plunge pools kind of at either the little lodge buildings. Like a lot of times, instead of a tent, they actually have a small building that's your room and your lodge room. and that might have a plunge pool, or definitely this tent has this beautiful plunge pool here. And this is more of a basic experience, and this might be really far out in a bush and more of a camp that they can actually move around. You can see though, even for at a very basic type of tent, it's still comfortable. You still have your beds, just regular beds and a little chair and you know, a little coffee station in there. So it's still quite a comfortable experience, and even being probably one of the more basic options when you get a tented camp in South Africa. And these are great for getting really far out into the bush and really getting that great experience and getting fairly close to where the animals are. Not to be, you know, underestimated are the unique kind of rooming options that you'll see also throughout Africa and South Africa. A lot of kind of tree house, even though they're not really in trees, but they call them like tree house accommodations, where they're elevated up in the air. They do this for one, the incredible views, and you can see all around and see animal sightings kind of everywhere, and also for elephants that if they're kind of up above the elephants, it's a good place to be because elephants are always sourcing water. And if there's plumbing into any of the accommodations, they can smell water. They can smell water if it's pipes underground, or just they can just find it, and they will dig up pipes and break pipes to try and get to water. So it can be a constant struggle with lodge owners to try and elephant proof their water supplies to the rooms. Some of the lodges may be fairly remote, and getting to them can be a little tricky. So many will have road access, but the roads are going to be dirt roads, and they can take a while to navigate. So it will take you an hour to drive on a paved highway, would take many hours to drive on a dirt road. So a lot of them have private airstrips, when a short flight can be preferable than a long, kind of dusty, difficult drive. Keeping in mind though that the fly-in safaris are generally going to be more expensive, and they will also come with fairly strict luggage restrictions. And when they tell you when you're on a fly-in safari, you are limited to 20 kilograms of luggage. You are really limited to 20 kilograms of luggage, and do not bring your rolly kind of suitcase, and because they'll be like, no, find a duffel bag. They are very strict, which you can understand because these small planes have to be very well balanced. So let's have a look. This is another great option. The music's gonna be a little loud, but I want to show you this. So it's a great option for exploring South Africa, especially if you don't have a lot of time, is a rail journey. There's 3 different options, the Rovos Rail, the Shongolo Express, and the Blue Train. They're all considered luxury trains, with the Blue Train that runs from Cape Town to Pretoria is the most exclusive. Rovos Rail and Shongolo are both owned by the same company, and both are luxury and similarly appointed. So the look and feel of the rail cars are very similar, but the Shongolo has a more relaxed atmosphere. So Rovos Rail, you're going to be expected to dress for dinner. It's a little bit more formal, where Shongolo is a little bit more casual. But both Rovos and Shongolo offer great itineraries all over Africa. Rovos Rail does the same Cape Town to Pretoria that the Blue Train does, but they also have other great itineraries kind of all throughout Africa, like up to Victoria Falls and through Namibia, and even out to some of the Western African countries that you don't typically go to for safari and such, but are very great options for cultural experiences. So even look at the bathroom, and that's in a train. a little sneak peek that you may be seeing one of these itineraries come up on with us for 2023. So I really hope that this has given you a good idea of what South Africa has to offer. If you're considering a trip to Africa, really consider Africa as your option, especially at your first trip. It's a little bit of everything and you won't be disappointed. We do have an excellent South Africa itinerary coming up this fall. It includes Cape Town, Kruger, a private game reserve, and also goes up to Victoria Falls. So it's a really good inclusive itinerary. And I think Irene can just stick the link for that into the chat. So if you want to have a look at that, you can have a look at that. So thank you, everyone. I hope you learned a bit about South Africa. I hope it interests you as much as it interests me. And we would love to have some comments or questions.
Yes. Well, we have one question, Marion. Thank you. I even learned more than I already knew about South Africa. So I did find that very interesting. Thank you. So one of the questions is specific to the tents that you showed and the safety of that with respect to animals, and how is the camp structured?
Okay, it depends on the camp. Some camps are fenced. Usually it's with an electric fence because that keeps out elephants. Elephants are the biggest issue with the camps, and it's not so much that they're going to hurt a person. It's that, again, they're looking for water and they can be very destructive. So a lot of times they'll have a fence around the camp just to keep the elephants out. So other than that, the camps are typically guarded. So you have usually an armed guard that's there all night, kind of watching over the camp and just making sure, again, the big problem, not a big problem, but what they would mostly be watching for would be leopards. Just because they're solitary and they tend to roam and investigate, and you don't want to accidentally walk up on a leopard. But that being said, you're very safe inside your tent. No animals coming into your tent. They really don't want to be that close to you, and they know you're there, so they have no desire to kind of come into the tent and come in contact with you. But there you do have that guard out there, and depends on the size of the camp. You may have more than one guard. You may have a few guards wandering around. You'll see them. Once it gets dark out, they don't like you to wander around a camp by yourself. So if you're, say, at dinner or having a few drinks after dinner and you need to go back to your tent, you'll often be escorted by one of these gentlemen. And or sometimes women. I've also seen women doing this, and they bring you back to your tent and make sure you're safe and sound. If you need to leave your tent in the middle of the night for any reason, which you typically wouldn't, you have washrooms inside you have those beautiful ensuite bathrooms and such, and there's not a lot of reason that you would need to leave your tent in the middle of the night. But if you did, they go through the safety protocol of how to do that. And it's very often a way of calling to have that guard come and get you. And it's different at every camp, and their protocols are different, but they pretty much all will do it somehow. And when they bring you to your tent initially, they talk to you about how to do that.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I've done a lot of trips to Africa. I don't think I've ever had anyone need to leave their tent in the middle of the night. So it's not it's not something that commonly happens. And once you're there and kind of experience it and see it, you realize that you're very safe and nothing's coming in your tent.
Okay. Now, so on some of the images I saw, there seems to be several layers up to the opening of the enclosure of the tent. So
yes,
that privacy aspect was brought up in a question. So there are several layers.
Yes. So most often the tents, and again, they're all different, but if they're open like that, like some you saw where they were kind of rolled back and open. Usually they're not left like that. I think they've done that for pictures.
Okay.
So usually those sides that are rolled up and kind of attached up are down, and there's some kind of door. So
Okay.
some tents might be just your, like a zip up and you go in, or often these tents have an actual real door that you can open and walk in, so that you can, you know, people aren't going to walk in there in the middle of the night. And like the tented camps are small too. They're not a huge, with like lots of people around. They're fairly small. It might only be with our group. It might only be our group at the camp for that night at that lodge.
Yeah, that's great, because that's kind of one of the questions touched on that, about how many tents might be in an area.
Yeah, and again, they're all different. Like some, I just did a huge supplier networking 2-week conference with all different lodges and such. And there's some lodges that are even too small for us. Like they only have 4 tents at them. Usually the ones with really low numbers of tents like that are either very secluded or very exclusive and high end. But there's a lot that have, you know, say 6 to 10 tents. And some are tents and some are like actual buildings too. But the tents that we've stayed in have had real doors on them.
Okay, so, okay, can you explain the safari vehicle that you actually get to do the viewing in? How many people typically would be fitted into that vehicle, and what's our game plan for our?
Okay, they're all a little bit different again, because typically the lodges own them, that you go to. So wherever lodge you're staying at, they have their vehicles. So you're not driving necessarily, and this again, it depends what country you're in, but in South Africa, so let's just stick to South Africa. So generally we're not driving between lodges in these vehicles. These vehicles are at the lodges and they're just for game drives. Between lodges and other sightseeing, we're in like our typical kind of minibus that we do most tours in. So in South Africa, when we're at a lodge, and they may have this type of vehicle that's got, you know, the seats 3 across, or they sometimes smaller ones. There's a picture. Okay, see, this is our group at one of the lodges, and you can see it's also a 3 across. It's got no top on it, which it quite often you can have them completely open like this. And they tend to try and spread it out that we're just, everybody has kind of a window seat, or aisle seat. I'm not sure what you call it when there's no actual windows, but everybody is at, like, everybody's at an edge, not in the middle, and then you just put your stuff in the middle.
I see one necessary item is a wide-brimmed hat.
It is ideal to have one, just because the sun in South Africa is quite strong, and you know, you're going to start your game drive in the morning when it's still dark. And so in the morning when it's still dark, you're actually going to have probably a sweater on. They even have blankets that they will often be on the seats when you get out there, because it's cool in the morning when you start and you're in this open air vehicle and you start moving, and it does get quite cool. And then as the sun comes up, it heats up very quickly. So you want to make sure that you've got clothes on that you can kind of shed outer layers, because you will get warm quite quickly. And definitely, if you know, you can be in open air vehicles like this with no roof, you need some kind of block from the sun.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, you and I have spoken about this tour many times, and you always refer to it really as, for somebody who's not been to Africa, the continent, that it's a great introduction because of the diversity of the tour. Can you just elaborate a bit more?
Absolutely. It's a great way to kind of work yourself into Africa. especially our particular South Africa tour, because we start in Cape Town, which is very, you saw the pictures, you saw it was like very cosmopolitan, very much, you know, you could be in Europe, you could be anywhere, and, you know, great shopping options, the food's outstanding, you have the wine region. So it's a very easy kind of getting into the feel of Africa, and then we work our way out. So we go from there, and then we work our way out to Kruger, stay at a great lodge just outside of Kruger, which is absolutely one of my favorite lodges. It has this beautiful infinity pool. They have giraffes wandering around the property. I wish I had pictures, but they have giraffes wandering around the property, so you can be in the pool with your, you know, cocktail on the edge and a giraffe walking by behind you. It's just such an experience, and the food there is absolutely outstanding at this lodge. So we do there, and then we from there we come to this private game reserve, which is just outside of Kruger. And this backs, so they have a couple different lodges on the property in the private reserve. The last time we stayed at the Beck's one, the time before we stayed at a different one. But they're beautiful lodges and so comfortable. And again, the game viewing is really, really exceptional. This is where they have the cheetahs that we can get out and walk to go see, which is usually, they always keep it as a surprise, but I guess I just let it out if anybody wants to go, because it's usually kind of a big surprise. Okay, now everybody get out. They were like, what? But anyway, so just forget I said that. No cheetahs. And then we go from there, we go up to Victoria Falls, which is, you know, a big stop on kind of a lot of people's bucket list, is just to see the Victoria Falls, which is a great town. So the falls are wonderful and they're huge. They just go on and on and on. It's like Niagara Falls times 10. And but the little town of Victoria Falls is just great little town too, and it has wonderful, really authentic shopping opportunities. So, you know, after your little trip all through Africa and you want to bring some souvenirs home, Victoria Falls is the place to get them. So it's a really good tour to kind of start you off in Africa. If you're not sure, you want to like head to the heart of Tanzania or Botswana and just be, you know, safari day in and day out, you want to kind of try it and see, it's a great little way to try a little bit of everything.
I was going to ask, was I right that Victoria Falls is the last stop on the tour? Or
yeah, on that South Africa tour, it is.
Okay. So thank you for that. So somebody's asking who our tour host is with this tour.
It's Kirsten.
Okay.
So if you know, Kirsten's our guest experience manager. She's kind of like in charge of all the tour hosts, and she is wonderful. Everybody loves Kirsten, and she is very, very capable, and her and I are both Africa fanatics. She would retire to Africa if she could, and I hope not, because she'll just have to, I guess, do all the African tours from there. But yeah, she's an excellent host for this tour.
She's been to the continent more than once, that's for sure.
Oh, many, many, many times, and a lot of different countries in Africa. She's very well traveled when it comes to Africa.
So I don't see if there's anybody who has a question. I think we've pretty much covered them.
Did anybody raise their hands?
No, nobody here. You're welcome to come on board and talk. The other thing I'd ask you to, or remind you about, Marianne, is that we do have a follow-up tour, right, to our South Africa tour.
Yeah, so this South Africa tour is like many of our Africa tours. So we usually try and do Africa in kind of 2 blocks, one in the spring and one in the fall. And we do kind of back-to-back tours during those blocks, just because it gives everybody an opportunity. If you're in Africa and you want to see more of it, then it's easy to go from one tour to another. It means our tour host just goes there and stays for, you know, a month and a half, 2 months, however long. So it makes things fairly easy. So with the South Africa tour, we do I can't remember what order. So we do Tanzania, then we do Uganda and Rwanda, then we do South Africa, and then we do Ethiopia. So we're there for, well, Kirsten's there for a fair bit doing all those tours, but if you really wanted to extend your Africa and add on either way, we can definitely help you with that. And if you're not sure which way you want to do that, you want to know a little bit more about it, just, contact us, and we will surely chat with you about exactly what all those tours entail.
And if you have any questions about Africa, call Marianne. Yeah, there's no hands going up. Any more questions? Okay. I don't see anything.
Well, I want to thank everybody and Irene for helping me, and everybody for attending. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned a bit about South Africa. I hope it made you want to go to South Africa, because it has my heart, and I really want to show everybody to the continent. So
before you hang up, Marianne, there's one last question here.
Okay.
Somebody's asking the length of the tour, and I don't have it handy. Is it 11, 12, 13?
12 days off the top of my head. I don't want, it's somewhere around 12 days, and I don't have it. All my screens have the presentation up, so I can't.
So Marianne, if you check, I added a link to the South Africa tour page, and if you open that up, you'll find it on there.
Yes. Okay. So just if you link on there, you can see all the details of the tour and the whole itinerary laid out day by day. Again, just let us know if you have any questions. I think the tour is about 12 days long. And it's definitely, every moment is great.
I'm just going here, Marianne. Yeah, it's October 2nd to the 13th.
Okay, there we go. 11 days.
There we go.
Hey, well, very good. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you next week. Next week is a tour info session. So that, as opposed to just a virtual tour, we're actually going to go in depth into one of our upcoming tours. And we are going to Niagara Falls and Niagara on the Lake, which is kind of hometown for some of us here at the Women's Travel Club. So we should be able to give you a great in-depth look at Niagara Falls and Niagara on the Lake. Great options for this fall if you're not really ready to go overseas yet, but you want something a little closer to home, but you want to get away. It's a really cool, really good option.
Yeah, and then the Niagara Falls portion of the tour is based in Canada. So
yeah, it's Niagara Falls, Canada.
Yeah.
The better side.
Yeah.
Sorry, Americans. We're just saying that because we live here. We know that there's more on the Canadian side.
That's true.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. And we will see you next week. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.